What is up, guys? BK Voiceover here, and welcome to our latest video. And today we are going to be going over Seattle's initial 53-man roster and practice squad. So it's been a very busy couple of days for Seattle so far, and I wanted to hold off for a couple of days before I did my 53-man roster analysis because I was pretty confident that that the team was going to be making a few more changes to the main 53-man roster before we actually got to the start of the regular season. So I'm happy that I waited because there were a couple of additional moves that got made. So now I think we are pretty close to having the final 53-man roster, or day one 53-man roster and practice squad going forward. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. But before we do, as always, if you like the video, be sure to drop a like down below. Let me know that I'm doing a good job. Also, if you like the content and you want to see more regular season, off-season, and hopefully postseason Seahawks content, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I post. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First off, the quarterback competition. No real surprises here. Quarterback Geno Smith won the starting job. We knew that as soon as the last preseason game ended. So no real shocks there. Drew Lock will be backing him up. No real shock there. And then Jacob Eason was cut. I think they were hoping to bring him back on the practice. Looks like they had no intention to bring him back on the practice squad. For reasons that we'll discuss later. Anyways, he ended up signing with the Panthers. With the Panthers practice squad. So hopefully he gets some playing time in Carolina. I know they're dealing with a lot of QB injuries right now. So best luck to him. So no real surprises at QB. Running back, again, no real surprises. Rashad Penny. We all kind of knew week one he was going to be the undisputed starter. So he'll be your RB1 going into week one against the Broncos. Kenneth Walker, of course, made the roster. He's recovering from surgery to repair a hernia. According to Pete, there's no timeline on his return to the field as it stands right now. However, he did. They're taking it day by day, so hopefully he'll be ready for week one. We'll have to wait and see, though. And then, of course, Travis Homer and DJ Dallas put on an absolute clinic during the preseason. So at this point, I don't think any of us were really surprised that they ended up making the final 53-man roster. And then because of that, we also cut running back Ronnie Rivers. Running back Josh Johnson got waived with an injury designation, and he cleared waivers, so he is back on IR, and I believe he's done for the year. So, and then we also cut Darwin Thompson. And then, excuse me, moving on from running back to wide receiver, which was by far and away, I think, the most difficult position group to guess going into the offseason. Didn't really know how many wide receivers they were going to be keeping on the roster this year. They've kept as many as 7 some years, and they've kept as few as 4 on the initial roster in other years. But it looks like they've pretty much mellowed it out a bit. So the first 3, no real surprise. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett are undisputedly your 1A, 1B receivers. D. Eskridge, I think they still have a lot of faith in him. They did spend a second-round pick on him. He has been hampered by injury and has lost some time in camp. But I think that as long as he remains healthy and is able to get some practice in, understand the offense a little better, I think he's going to be effective out of the slot. A little bit of a shocker. Well, I guess not really a shocker after his terrible preseason, but wide receiver Freddie Swain did not make the final cuts on the 53-man roster. He ended up going, and apparently he had a lot of interest after he was released. After he was released, apparently he is going to play in Miami, in his home state, so hopefully he does well there. So, with my original roster, I had these 3, and then I had Bo Melton, Derek Young, and Freddie Swain. So I only had one of those last three on here. So Derek Young made it. I think he had a solid enough camp and a solid enough preseason that he was going to make the 53-man roster. Yeah, with Freddie Swain's disappointment, he was going to be cut, but Bo Melton was a little bit disappointing in the preseason enough, and Penny Hart was impressive enough and has done enough in the past couple of preseasons, I think, to make the 53-man. And then Marquis Goodwin, our wide receiver depth during the preseason was noticeably bad, so I think they realized they needed more of a veteran presence on your wide receiver depth chart. So, your final wide receiver room, at least for week 1, is DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, D. Eskridge, Marquis Goodwin, Derek Young, and Penny Hart. I think this is about as good as you can get. So, of course, that meant cutting a slew of wide receivers, some of which we brought back on the practice squad. We will get to them in a sec. Tight end, again, no real surprises here. We kind of knew what this was going to be going into the regular season after they didn't draft a tight end or do any other moves aside from trading for Fant. So Noah Fant, Will Dissly. Noah Fant's going to be your tight end 1, followed by Dissly, and Colby Parkinson is going to be your tight end 3. Starting offensive line, there was a little bit of give and take between Abraham Lucas and Jay Curran as to who would be the starter, but I think it's pretty clear going into week 1 that your starting offensive line, assuming this is under the caveat that Damian Lewis is back from his ankle sprain injury by week 1. So assuming Damian Lewis is healthy, your starting offensive line appears to be Charles Cross at left tackle, Damian Lewis at left guard, Austin Blythe is your starting center, Gabe Jackson is your starting right guard, and Abraham Lucas is your starting right tackle. Your backups are Stone Forsythe, Kyle Fuller, Phil Haynes, and Jake Curhan. No real shocks there. All right, moving on to the defensive side of the ball, starting with the defensive line. Initially, they did have LJ Collier on the roster, but after the initial... This is why I waited a couple of days, because I had a feeling that LJ Collier was not going to be on the 53-man, at least not active, by the time the cut-downs and the moves were done. And I was correct. So your starters on the defensive line appear to be Al Woods is going to be your starting nose tackle. Shelby Harris and Poona Ford are your starting defensive ends. They will be backed up by Quentin Jefferson, Brian Monet, and Miles Adams. We're also just going down the line on this, and we'll get to injured reserve players later. So no need to worry about any of that. So moving on to your linebackers, we'll start with the outside guys. To no one's surprise, Daryl Taylor is going to be your starting. Daryl Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu are going to be your starting outside linebackers, your starting edge rushers. No real surprise there. Boye Mafe had a really solid camp and preseason. He did injure his shoulder during the second preseason game, so they kind of took it easy on him, and he did not play in the last preseason game, but he did more than enough to show that he is going to hopefully be an effective pass rush specialist in his rookie season. Alton Robinson, he has a PCL sprain, so Pete has said that it's not serious, so that's why he's not on IR right now, but hopefully he will be ready to go by the start of the regular season. If not, that's kind of one of the reasons why they went and grabbed, along with another IR designation, is the reason they went out and grabbed Daryl Johnson, who they claimed off of waivers from the Carolina Panthers. Played 2 seasons with the Bills and then played last year with the Panthers. Definitely, he's a third-string pass rusher at this point, but gives you some depth going in until your guys can get healthy. So, interesting move. One of the most very head-scratching moves, though, for this roster is the fact that Seattle is only keeping 3 inside linebackers on their roster. You got Jordan Brooks, who will be your starting middle linebacker, likely. He'll be playing opposite Cody Barton. And then your only backup is Nick Bellore, who, while yes, he is designated as a linebacker, he's primarily a special teamer and also plays fullback. So Their lack of inside linebacking depth is a spot for concern. However, they do have several several inside linebackers that they added to the practice squad, so they can call them up in a pinch if needed. So moving on to the defensive backfield. After the couple days of several moves that have gone on, your starting outside corners for the time being appear to be Sidney Jones and Artie Burns, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Chicago Bears. Tariq Woolen and Mike Jackson are going to be backing them up, and then Seattle also claimed off of waivers from the Jets cornerback Isaiah Dunn. He was a UDFA out of Oregon State at the end of in the 2021 draft. He actually had a decent season. Played in 12 games for the Jets, only started one game, but had 2 pass deflections, so pretty decent there. He'll offer some much needed depth. So nickel corner, you're wondering probably where Kobe Bryant is. I moved him down to nickel corner because that appears to be where he's getting a lot of his starting snaps at now. So he will be, I think for the time being, or possibly could take his spot depending on how well he does. But Justin Coleman was initially not on the 53-man roster. He was cut, but that was mainly just to make roster spots available for like necessary moves that had to happen. So Justin Coleman was brought back. Kobe Bryant will likely be backing him up unless he proves that he is better than him in that nickel spot. Safeties, a little bit of a shocker. Quandary Diggs, Jamal Adams are your starters. No real surprise there. Not surprised by Josh Jones and Ryan Neal making the 53-man roster. Marquis Blair, however, second round pick from I think the 2019 draft. He was cut. I mean, he has had a very disappointing first few seasons in Seattle, and it was you kind of saw it coming after a little bit. So his spot was taken by preseason and camp standout Joey Blunt. So really excited to see what this guy's got. He has a lot of upside from what I've seen during the preseason. So yeah, really excited to see what he's got. And then special teams, no surprises there. There was no competition for any of those spots. Jason Myers is still your kicker. Michael Dixon is still your punter. Tyler Ott is still your long snapper. So in order to make those... So in order to make those 53-man roster moves, they also had to move quite a few people over to IR. So we'll start things off. First of all, we knew about Trey Brown and John Radigan. They were on the PUP list. We knew they weren't going to be ready to go. So we know Cody Thompson was going to be out. We knew Ben Burke-Hervin's going to be out. We knew John Radigan and Trey Brown were going to be at the following IR designations, and there were quite a few. First of all, Tyreek Smith, he was moved to IR before the cutdown date, so he is out for the season with a hip injury. Running back Josh Johnson was waived with an injury designation, and he cleared waivers, meaning he's back on the team but on their injured reserve list. And then cornerback John Reed was also placed on temporary IR with a groin strain that flared up during practice. And then defensive end LJ Collier was also moved to temporary IR with an elbow injury, which sounds a lot like pitcher's elbow. So not ideal. But anyways, since they were put on since they either went to IR from the PUP list or were put there after the initial 53-man cut down, they can come back. The earliest they can come back is week 5. So those were the 4 IR moves that were made in order to make space for these guys on the 53-man roster. Now, going over to the practice squad, you probably saw it sitting over the side. So you might have already seen who's on the practice squad already. But as it stands right now, this is not complete. There's still 1 open spot remaining. But we'll go through that list. So as it stands right now, your practice squad consists of quarterback Sean Mannion, he was on our he was part of camp with us last season. He's played several seasons for the Vikings, so we also kept we got brought back 3 wide receivers. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who we traded for with the Eagles. We sent them Ugo Amadi, and they then sent Ugo Amadi to the Titans. They brought back wide receiver Cade Johnson, which is awesome. I really like Cade Johnson. Really like his upside. They also brought back wide receiver Bo Melton. Was pleasantly surprised when he wasn't claimed off waivers. But yeah, happy to see that he's back with the team. I think he was just the he didn't show enough to make the 53-man, but he could very well get some chances to be called up during the regular season, and hopefully we can see the reason why he was drafted, even if he was a 7th round pick. In addition, running back Darwin Thompson, he flashed a little bit during the preseason. He also has NFL experience, so makes sense to bring him back. He was easily behind your starting 4. He was easily the best running back on the team. Tight end Tyler Mabry, he's been on the practice squad for years now, primarily a blocking tight end. Then for offensive linemen, they brought back 3 tackles. They brought back Greg Island, tackle Liam Ryan, and then brought in an outside guy, Jalen McKenzie from USC. Dakota Shepley, I think the only other offensive lineman that they cut that went anywhere is I think that the Cowboys signed Dakota Shepley to their practice squad. For the linebacker, they didn't sign any defensive linemen to the practice squad. They did sign 4 linebackers, 1 outside linebacker, 3 inside linebackers. Jabari Zuniga, who was a 3rd round pick by the Jets last year, I think, or a couple years ago. So he was waived from the roster, so we grab him. He'll provide some nice depth. Kept 3 inside linebackers on the 53-man. Aaron Doncourt makes perfect sense because he's a free roster spot. And then, of course, some preseason standouts, By Jones and Tanner Muse. Great. I'm a big fan of both of these guys. I hope they get to see the field at some time. Then you got cornerback Quandary Mosley, who I think he was cut by the Jets. We signed him from there. Cornerback Xavier Crawford, who I don't know much about him. I need to do a little more research. And then strong safety Scott Nelson out of Wisconsin, who we signed as a UDFA to start the season. So if I'm correct, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 of our 17 spots on the practice squad are filled. I am pretty sure they're going to fill that last practice squad spot with Joshua Onujiogu, who we initially made the 53-man roster, but we cut as part of making space for other roster moves. I would be incredibly surprised if he's not back on the 53-man roster, or on the practice squad. That's, of course, under the stipulation that he clears waivers. I'm sure he will, but we'll just have to wait and see. So, yeah, for the time being, that is your 53-man roster and practice squad. And that's going to do it for the video today. Be sure to drop a comment down below with what you guys think of the 53-man roster and practice squad, and any changes that you might want to see, or anything that you disagree with, any players that you think should have made it that didn't. So yeah, with that, really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and I will be around to give you that content you also justly deserve. So with that, I'm going to log off. But you guys have a great rest of your night, great long weekend, long Labor Day weekend, and as always, go Hawks.